Stop trying to justify this whole thing and admit you're in danger.
Today, I'm going to show you my complete Breaking Bad iceberg chart, from Mandela Effects to real-life stories. We're going to cover all areas of the Breaking Bad universe. Now, if you don't know already, an iceberg chart is a big chart full of tiers of popularity about a certain topic. The things at the top of the iceberg you might already know, but as we go further down the iceberg, they become more and more obscure. Just like in my Walking Dead iceberg video, I've made this chart myself, and I've got 5 tiers. The first one is called Basic Tip, then there's Underwater, Murky Waters, the Deep, and then finally the Dark Unknown. So let's start with Basic Tip. SaveWalterWhite.com. That website that Walt Jr. makes in season 2 is actually a real website. If you click anywhere on the page, it takes you to the AMC website to watch The Walking Dead. Werner Heisenberg. Walter White's street name and alter ego is Heisenberg, named after Werner Heisenberg, one of the key pioneers of quantum mechanics. In Better Call Saul, we also meet another Werner, one of the engineers who helped Gus create the lab. There comes a time where Gus feels he has to get rid of Werner because he can't trust him and he's already said too much about the project. Mike wants to be the one to kill him, and in a very similar way, we see him try to bargain with Mike how we saw Walter bargain with him. It was almost an exact mirror of that scene.
If I can talk to Gus, I can convince him, okay? Just let me, please let me talk to him. Shut up!
They could not, they would not.
Pull yourself together.
Give me the phone, I call her now. Give it to me.
Calm down.
But this time, he was fond of Werner, he liked him, but he knew with Fring and his people, he had to go. Much like with everything else in Better Call Saul, this added so much more depth into Breaking Bad.
There are so many stars visible in New Mexico. I will walk out there to get a better look.
And on a slightly less somber note, but then again, not really, we have Slipping Jimmy. Just recently a cartoon came out called Slipping Jimmy that is an origin story. This was meant to show the start of his chaotic personality as Slipping Jimmy. I don't think this was meant to be taken too seriously. It just looks like that big mouth cartoon but with a Better Call Saul skin on it to make you want to watch it. It's an animation that's there if you want to watch it, but I don't think it's in any way meant to be some massively thought out part of Jimmy's story. It's not really even a part of the franchise in that regard.
I know what you were, what you are. People don't change. You're Slippin' Jimmy. And Slippin' Jimmy I can handle just fine, but Slippin' Jimmy
as a cartoon
is like a chimp with a machine gun.
Heisenberg's product is actually just rock candy.
This is actually, it's rock candy. And the flavor is cotton candies.
I mean, it wasn't going to be the real thing, was it? Not unless Dean Norris is around. Jesse never met Walt Jr. These characters just never met. Maybe Walt Jr. was just too powerful for Jesse.
Then why don't you just fucking die already? You're a
Roof pizza. Now, I'm sure you've heard before that this was done in one take, which it was. But what's so interesting about it is that ever since this scene, pizza in the entire Breaking Bad universe has revolved around it. When he threw the pizza, it was all in one piece. It was uncut to even make the scene possible. From that point, when people order from Venezia's Pizzeria, they have to make it clear that they want it cut.
Yes, sliced, please.
Yo, what's up with the pie, man? It ain't cut.
This place, they don't cut their pizza and they pass the savings on to you.
What am I supposed to do with this?
Robert Forster. Robert Forster played Ed the Disappearer, the vacuum guy, in Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and El Camino. He sadly died a day after El Camino came out. This was his last role. And now we are on to Underwater. Walter leaving the watch had no meaning. In the finale, Walter White leaves the watch that Jesse gave him at a random place at a really random time. Vince Gilligan revealed on Talking Bad this actually had no meaning. He just forgot to put the watch on Bryan Cranston in the scenes closer to the finale. So this was just making that make sense. You can pretty much just interpret it yourself. You can see it as him leaving his old self behind, leaving it for someone else to find use of. There is no profound meaning behind it officially. Greg Nicotero did Gus's death makeup. Greg Nicotero is the makeup designer who makes the zombies in The Walking Dead, and he designed how Gus would look after the explosion, so Gus really went out like a zombie.
There it is.
I just caught you in 4K, you haven't subscribed yet, you might want to change that. Breaking Bad minisodes. There are Breaking Bad minisodes online that show just 5-minute unseen adventures from a couple of these characters. Walt and Hank just before he would marry Marie, which is one of my favourite things on the internet.
Jesus. No, not in the hat. It's a rental. So you broke bad one night, big deal. Who doesn't? You move on from here, okay?
Jesse and Badger in their band.
See, now you made me say the word
Badger and Walter breaking into a place, which is also one of my favourite things on the internet. The actors actually nearly laughed in this scene.
So your thinking was that I would have a lockpick up my ass. Is that right?
You don't?
It was essentially just 5 minutes of improv, and there's a Hank and Marie one that I don't want to talk about. El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie. In 2019, El Camino came out. People noticed that the title is called El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, making people think there could be more than one.
A lot of us have noticed that it's called El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, not the.
It used to be the Breaking Bad movie, or they had a version of it, the final chapter, and now it's a Breaking Bad. It now gets me guessing.
In reply to this, Vince Gilligan said, "Never say never." Jesse's shaved head. There are a few bald characters in Breaking Bad, but the meaning behind Jesse's shaved head both times was a way to rid himself of his past trauma and his past identity. The first time was Aaron Paul's own idea, as he felt it was appropriate for the inner turmoil Jesse was experiencing, letting go of his past, and then again in El Camino.
Maybe don't, like, shave and whatnot, you know? Be less recognizable.
Oh, dude, why'd you...
Looking sharp, yo.
Feel like a new man?
Yeah, thanks.
Bryan Cranston saw his daughter's face. Bryan Cranston has said that when they were filming Jane's death, as he was looking at her face, it slowly faded into his daughter's face and he imagined his daughter laying there. That was him actually crying in that scene.
All of a sudden, her facial features disappeared, and it was replaced with the features of my real daughter. It scared me, of course. Then maybe a few seconds later, that disappeared and Kristen's face came back. But there was a moment where it was very clear it was my own daughter.
Now we're on to murky waters. First up, we have the Walking Dead connection.
Oh, and make sure you talk to the general manager. His name is Glenn.
Glenn.
Look at him. Vultures.
Hey, go on, strip it clean.
Stay with me here. Zombies.
They are just fun little Easter eggs, but they're connections nonetheless. First of all, of course, you can actually see the blue Heisenberg meth in Merle Dixon's drug bag. In Fear the Walking Dead, we even hear the Heisenberg theme play. Then in season 4 of The Walking Dead, we hear Daryl describe a dealer that Merle had that sounded a lot like Jesse.
Merle had this dealer, janky little white guy, pulls a gun and says, "I'm gonna kill you, bitch."
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, the workstation.
And the big one is the really similar red car we see in both of the shows. Now what makes this the most major, most intentional connection is who Skylar spoke to on the phone at the car dealership. She said,
Oh, and make sure you talk to the general manager. His name is Glenn.
Walter even repeats it.
Glenn.
Now I didn't say this in my Walking Dead Iceberg video because I thought if you watched The Walking Dead, it's pretty common knowledge. Glenn was a pizza delivery driver for at least a year in Atlanta, and that's how he knew the city so well. But remember, there is a 3-year time difference from this scene in Breaking Bad to the time where this scene in The Walking Dead is happening. There's literally nothing to say he wasn't at that car dealership in New Mexico. We just know for sure that he was a pizza delivery guy in Atlanta at least a year. And again, this adds so much more depth to why he really cared about this cool looking car. There's more to it. He always wanted to drive this. He must have seen it at the car dealership.
Hey, go on, strip it clean.
So I get to drive at least a few more days.
Maybe we'll get to steal another one someday.
Glenn.
This is just really great depth and adds to it, again, if it's in the same universe. And I think the most they would officially do with this is an episode on Tales of the Walking Dead. Each episode is its own story, and they could do one of Jesse in Alaska. It wouldn't even have to be canon, just for fun. There have been times in Breaking Bad where the characters such as Skinny Pete and Badger and even Saul have said the word zombie, and we know in The Walking Dead, the word zombie and the concept of a zombie isn't a thing.
Zombie mode.
Zombies. Yeah,
But it's such a small thing, it wouldn't even have to be retconned if they were to take it seriously. Next up, there's also a theory that water started the apocalypse and caused the zombies in The Walking Dead. This one could correspond or perhaps even make more sense with what we've just spoke about. For 2 years, Heisenberg cooked this product that hadn't been made before. No one had done it this pure to cause this clear blue colour. People think that Heisenberg's formula created the virus in The Walking Dead. It's interesting because just recently in one of The Walking Dead spin-off, The Walking Dead World Beyond, they revealed that one of the teams of doctors and scientists that caused the outbreak of the virus are called the Primrose and Violet team. There could be more, but right now those are the teams we know the names of. Could it be that they've named themselves after colours because what they were experimenting on was blue? Lalo and Howard are in Breaking Bad. So just recently in Better Call Saul, these two completely different characters from completely different sides of the show finally met when Lalo just strolled into Kim and Jimmy's condo and killed Howard just for being there. It's one of the most cold things I've seen a show do, and even more miserable in episode 8. We saw that Lalo also died from gas and was buried with Howard just out of convenience in the floor of the lab we see Jesse and Walt cooking in Breaking Bad. All this time, Howard and Lalo have been buried directly underneath them. They were in Breaking Bad.
I'll be like snuck down here in a laundry hamper for the rest of eternity.
Jesse's letter to Brock. Jesse's letter to Brock was the first thing Vince Gilligan wrote of El Camino, and it was meant to be the end narration. As Ed was taking Jesse to Alaska, you would hear Jesse read it, but it was cut. To this day, Vince Gilligan and Aaron Paul are the only people in the world to know what that letter said, but Aaron says he hopes one day he can reveal it. Next up, we have Bryan Cranston wanted the hat. Heisenberg's iconic look was actually Bryan Cranston's idea because he wanted a hat to cover his head in the Albuquerque heat. Walter becomes his enemies. From start to finish in Breaking Bad, after Walter defeats one of his enemies, he then takes something from them that they used to do. We saw this with Crazy 8.
You don't like the crust?
With Gus. With Mike and his drink.
No, have the same. No ice.
Rocks, right?
Rocks, yes.
And even when he kills Jack, how Jack killed Hank.
Do what you're gonna do. You pull that trigger, you never.
This was all showing that he was becoming the very person he used to be up against. Next up, we have colours in Breaking Bad. You've got green representing greed, money, growth, and envy. Blue symbolises loyalty, power, magic, sadness, purity, the sky. Yellow is pleasure, optimism, fear, suspicion, and paranoia. Purple was most of the time Marie's colour, and it represents luxury, royalty, protection, and safety. Orange represents humour, fire, and violence. Pink is associated with youth and tragedy. Red symbolises blood, experience, and criminality. Grey is associated with revenge, regret, grief, and depression. These are just a few examples of how colour is used in Breaking Bad. You can see how each character is associated with those colours. Callable numbers. You can actually call some of the numbers you see in Better Call Saul, and you get a real playback message. Fringsback. If you take the first letter of each of the episodes in Season 2 of Better Call Saul, you can arrange them to say Fringsback. This was foreshadowing his return in Season 3. Now we are on to the deep. The disappearance of Wendy. After Jesse and Wendy were caught by Gus's men trying to poison his other men, Jesse was taken to a meeting where he would make peace with those men, while Wendy was told to take a walk. She wasn't seen since, and that's because she was killed by those men she worked for. She was seen in Better Call Saul just recently, but obviously that was set before Breaking Bad. She hasn't been seen since because she's dead. Tuco's grill is still in the river. That scene where Hank threw Tuco's grill, they did that in many takes, and they had to retrieve each of the Tuco grills from the river after he had thrown them, but they're pretty sure one of them is still out there somewhere. Next up, we have lottery numbers' actual location. The lottery number coordinates where Walt used to bury his money and then later Hank and Gomez would be buried actually lead to the AMC studio where Breaking Bad was shot. Next up, we have Sumerium. There are 62 episodes of Breaking Bad exactly, because because the 62nd element on the periodic table is samarium. Samarium in particular is known for treating cancers, more notably lung cancer. Felina, the finale of Breaking Bad, is called Felina, and it's a portmanteau of iron Fe, lithium Li, and sodium Na. This spells out Felina, shorthand for blood, meth, and tears. Exactly 269 characters died in Breaking Bad alone. This number, of course, is so high because of the Wayfarer 515. Black armbands for Mike. On Jonathan Banks' last day, when they filmed that death scene, the crew wore black armbands. He deserves a shrine or a throne or something, especially after Better Call Saul. It's devastating. If they're gonna retcon anything, retcon Mike. It was Ignacio. In Breaking Bad Season 2, Episode 8, the episode literally called Better Call Saul, we first met the character Saul Goodman. Obviously with no plans of a spin-off and barely any background on the character, he was just a character, the lawyer in Breaking Bad. Later on in that episode where Walt and Jesse captured him, he cried out things like, "It was Ignacio, not me. Did Lalo send you?" At the time, these were completely made up, throwaway lines, clearly representing some dangerous situation he was in. However, Peter Gould wanted to add meaning behind this, as him and Vince Gilligan have done for so many other things in Better Call Saul. It adds so much more depth to Breaking Bad. In the Insider podcast, Vince Gilligan said he was close to not adding any meaning behind it, but Peter Gould pushed him and said, "No, we definitely should." And he was 100% right, because we saw recently from season 4 to 6 just why Jimmy was so scared of this Lalo. And we find out the reason he even says it was Ignacio is because Lalo thinks he has some kind of involvement in the breach of his family home when it was actually just Gus. He made Ignacio, aka Nacho, open up the back gate to Lalo's compound so that Gus's men could go in there. Lalo suspects that Saul was involved in it because Nacho introduced them both. Mike told Saul before not to be afraid of Lalo. He's not coming back, and he had to do it again in season 6.
Lalo said he was coming back.
He's not coming.
No, he said he was. He told me.
You understand me? He is not coming back.
The way Mike said it, he continues to feel anxious and paranoid about Lalo Salamanca. With how we've seen Jimmy reacts to this side of the show, this wasn't a definitive answer for him. Nacho and Lalo Salamanca are some of the greatest characters in TV history, and it all came from this throwaway line.
Ignacio! No!
I'm gonna come back. And then you are gonna tell me the whole story.
No, it wasn't me. It was Ignacio. He's the one. Lalo didn't send you? No, Lalo? Who?
So, who's Lalo?
737 down over ABQ. If you combine 4 episode names in season 2 of Breaking Bad with the black and white scenes in the cold open, they say 737 down over ABQ. This was foreshadowing the Wayfarer 515 that would happen at the end of the season. Walter's interactive videos. As part of promotion for season 1 of Breaking Bad in 2008, a video released called Walt's Wisdom where you could interact with it and to have Walter give you threats. And then a year later, one was called Walt's Warning as promotional content for season 2 of Breaking Bad.
Good night, Chris.
You basically watch through the eyes of someone who stumbled across his RV.
Why did you come out here? Wake up. You have no idea the sacrifices I have made for this family.
And he warned you not to tell anyone, and at the time you could add pictures and names to it. So he held a picture up of you or your friend and he said your name.
You so much as breathe a word about what you saw here today. Have I made myself clear?
Walt's Warning was an official nominee in the 14th annual Webby for the best use of video or moving image category and won a BIMA award.
And don't be like me. Be yourself. Good luck.
Dark Unknown. The Skylar Shadow Theory. This basically suggests that in the final episode of Breaking Bad, Felina, as Walt says goodbye to Skylar and Holly, as he walks out of the room, she looks down and her shadow makes it look like she's hung herself, potentially giving a really dark insight as to what happens after the events of the finale. Think of all the sadness that she would have had to endure. Not only is her life ruined now, but just hours later Walter would be announced dead. She knows that Walter is the reason Marie doesn't have a husband now. Walt Jr. and Holly don't have a father. Ted might never walk again. She's one of the only characters in Breaking Bad that haven't died or fled to new lives. This is a creepy theory. I like how spooky it is, but I do think it's important that Skylar, Holly and Walt Jr. do eventually get their lives turned back around, and they will eventually get Walt's money. I do hope one day Vince Gilligan will bring us back to the White family, but I'm not holding my breath on that for now. This is a chilling theory, but I don't think it's true. Next up, we have the Walt's phone call Mandela Effect. This was something that I've noticed a lot of people, including myself, get wrong. Do you remember in season 4 episode 2 where Walter shows up to Gus's house with a gun and attempts to kill him, but he's stopped by a phone call? But who was it that made that call? It was Mike, right? Here's the scene. It was Tyrus. The Mandela Effect is basically false memories shared by multiple people. It was called the Mandela Effect by a paranormal researcher, Fiona Broom, who reported having vivid and detailed memories of news coverage of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. You've likely seen this elsewhere on the internet with things like Looney Tunes being called Looney Tunes, to Pikachu having black on the end of his tail, to Curious George not even having one. People have remembered Darth Vader saying that he's Luke's father in a different way as the years have went on. I think people remember this as Mike because it's something he should have and might as well have said. Mr. Driscoll. At the end of El Camino, we find out so much about Jesse's new identity in Alaska.
What's your social security number?
But what we don't find out is his first name. We just know him as a Mr. Driscoll.
Mr. Driscoll.
And I've always thought, even with how definitive and conclusive El Camino was to Jesse's story, I think if anything, not mentioning his first name is something that will be referenced in the Gene timeline of Better Call Saul, or something in another project in the Breaking Bad universe, because I think that's really strange. It just feels like to me that's yet to be completed. So I'm not saying he's going to pop up in Gene Cinnabon, but we could really hear mentions of Jesse and not even realise it. The final ever filmed scene on Breaking Bad was the Ozymandias flashback of Walt and Jesse cooking, which is really sad, but I'm also pretty sure this is Jesse doing an impression of Link from Zelda. The Wayfarer 515 in the show is actually inspired by the real-life events of the 1986 Cerritos plane collision, where one of the controllers were actually called Walter White. Bob Odenkirk had his heart attack on 6/08. So as I'm sure you've heard of already by now, Bob Odenkirk had a heart attack on the set of Better Call Saul. It's only just recently come out that it was on episode 8 of season 6. They couldn't say which actors or people were involved in this scene because it would have been a massive spoiler just by Lalo and Howard being in the room alone. But it was right here. They filmed Lalo talking to them just before his heart attack, and then 2 months after they filmed the rest of it. Episode 8 was a really traumatic, really dark episode where a lot of messed up things happened, and it's really haunting to think that Bob Odenkirk had a really scary heart attack, and the people involved in that episode have said if no one else was in the room with him, if he just went back to his trailer, he might not have lived. The show would have just stopped, but fortunately he recovered. Walter's disturbing scene with Villain we didn't see. This remix was all planned before the show even started filming, and it would mean the death of Jesse. Jesse very early on was a character that was meant to die. Ironically, he ended up being one of the longest surviving ones. But this scene with Walter would happen because this unseen villain was the one that killed Jesse. We never saw this villain come to fruition either, although we did see aspects of the villain with Crazy 8, Tuco and Gus. Walter would torture this person in the crawl space beneath his house, cutting off his toes and cauterizing the wounds with a blowtorch. But Walter gives the drug dealer an out. He rigs a shotgun to a device with a tripwire. All the dealer has to do to end his suffering is trip the wire. Eventually, Walt Jr. comes home and finds the dealer and tries to help him out. But the dealer realizes that this is Walter White's son, so he trips the tripwire, killing Walt Jr. and himself. The Walter Witness Protection Theory. Now, at the end of Breaking Bad, obviously Walter White drops dead to the floor. Now, for years people have speculated on how he could have survived it. Until then, in El Camino with Jesse, we got that announcement to the public seemingly confirming that Walter did indeed die at the scene.
White, the former Albuquerque schoolteacher who was the subject of a 6-month international manhunt, was found dead late Tuesday.
And the only way he could be brought back from such a definitive ending...
Walking around the perimeter within the wall of this...
Yes, right.
And just, that was my exercise.
But how fun was that?
It
has
it's
to
kind
be
of fun.
Yeah.
You feel like you're in the witness protection program.
In a witness protection program, they would have to announce to the public, and sometimes even the family, that the person has died, especially with how high profile the Heisenberg case had got, to prevent fear in the public, and of course, so that everyone thinks Walter White is dead. The identity of Walter White died there and then, but he would be a goldmine for them on what he could tell them of the market of his product. While all the villains in Breaking Bad are dead, the market isn't. Lydia still had business with people. He would go into witness protection and they would help his family. Sure, Walter White died there and then, but if he's going to be brought back from what was a really definitive ending, this is how they're going to do it. It's obviously really unlikely, and the only way this would ever happen is if Vince Gilligan himself comes up with something that he could do with it. You might think, why would he even touch how perfect the ending of Breaking Bad was? Well, it's simply if he thinks of something even better. If in a few years' time he wants to do a 10-episode limited series called Heisenberg, who's going to stop him? He already did El Camino. If he's got a good idea, and or if AMC and Sony push him enough money, this is how they could bring Heisenberg back, and it wouldn't ruin a perfect ending if Vince Gilligan thinks it's really good. With that being said, of course, Breaking Bad is Walter White's story from beginning to end. I mean, he can pretty much do unlimited projects on any other character but Walter White. I'd love a Skinny Pete and Badger series set after Breaking Bad, but I think if anything, a lot of people would rather Walter White of all characters is left alone. He's had his story, he's had his perfect ending. Any other characters I would love to see come back in their own show, their own series. This has been my Breaking Bad Iceberg. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it? Comment down below and let me know what you think. And let me know your other suggestions. Any other Iceberg charts I'd like to see. Press the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.
You didn't bring a lockpick? What happened to your Jedi skills?